Ethan Rivers stood alone in his corner office on the 47th floor of a shimmering glass skyscraper in downtown Palo Alto. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the servers powering the billion-dollar tech empire he had built from scratch. Sunlight spilled in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting golden streaks across polished marble floors. In one hand, he held a steaming mug of black coffee. In the other, his phone, already buzzing with unread emails, news alerts, and meetings he didn't want to attend. He wasn't really looking for anything as he glanced out the window. It was just part of his morning routine: stare at the world below, remind himself how far he'd come. But today, something was different. Amid the sea of moving figures, commuters with briefcases, scooters zipping by, delivery trucks honking at red lights, his eyes stopped on a still form. Near the edge of a plaza, against the stone wall of a closed cafe, a man sat motionless. At first, Ethan thought he was just another unhoused stranger, a sadly common sight even in this land of innovation and excess. But then the man shifted slightly, revealing two small children curled up beside him. They leaned into his shoulder like it was their only source of warmth. Ethan leaned in, squinting. There was something about the man's posture, the way he sat, head bowed but proud in a way that didn't make sense. His heart skipped. He didn't know why, but something about that silhouette stirred something in him, a strange, uninvited familiarity. He blinked. Number it couldn't be, but his grip on the coffee mug tightened. Ethan blinked, trying to make sense of the scene below. A man knelt on the sidewalk, slouched forward like the weight of the world was on his back. In front of him was a battered cardboard box, barely holding together at the corners. Inside were a few coins, some crumpled bills, and a sign that read, "Anything helps." God bless. But that wasn't what got Ethan's attention. Two children, no older than 5 or 6, were huddled against the man's shoulders. One had a threadbare pink hoodie, the other a coat 3 sizes too big. Both wore expressions far too serious for kids their age. They didn't fidget, didn't laugh, didn't cry. They just leaned into him, quiet, like they were afraid to draw attention. Ethan's heart clenched. There was something haunting about the way the man held both children without moving, like he was holding on to them for warmth, for sanity, for survival. A gust of wind rattled the windows. Ethan's breath fogged the glass. He leaned closer. He didn't understand why this moment felt like a gut punch. Why this man among the dozens he saw every day, these kids among the thousands who went unnoticed in the city, had hit him so hard. But it did. Maybe it was the familiarity in the man's posture. Maybe it was how the kids mirrored each other's stillness. Or maybe, no, it couldn't be. He reached for his phone, zoomed in on the street. The man's face came into view, roughened by time and weather. His beard was uneven, his hair unwashed. But his eyes, those eyes. Ethan staggered back from the glass. A memory, sharp as broken glass, sliced through him. It was him, the man who once saved Ethan's life when he was just a teen, long before the suits, the boardrooms, and the empire. Now that man was homeless, and Ethan had no idea why. The luxury sedan rolled silently out of the underground parking lot, its tinted windows shielding its occupant from the world, or so Ethan thought. His hands tightened on the steering wheel as he pulled onto the street, mind still clouded with the image of the man and those two silent children. Traffic crawled, pedestrians shuffled by. He tried to shake the weight off, tried to remind himself he had meetings, deadlines, investors waiting for numbers. But just as he slowed at the red light near the corner, something made him glance left. There, the same man, still kneeling, still hunched. But this time, the man looked up, and in that single breath-stopping moment, their eyes met. Time didn't just slow, it cracked. The noise of the street, the distant hum of engines, the buzz of his phone, all of it vanished beneath the sudden, heavy silence between two pairs of eyes. The man squinted slightly as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Ethan didn't blink. Couldn't. It was him. There was no longer any doubt. The shape of his face, the angle of his brow, the scar beneath his right eye. It was all there, buried beneath layers of dirt and hardship. The same man who had once pulled a bleeding, trembling 16-year-old Ethan out of a burning wreck on a highway road in Nevada. A man with nothing to gain, who disappeared before Ethan could even ask his name. Now, years later, he was sitting on a corner with two children pressed to his sides, begging with a cardboard box. The light turned green. A horn blared behind Ethan. He didn't move. The man's lips parted slightly. He didn't wave, didn't smile, didn't ask for help, just held Ethan's gaze like a silent plea, or maybe a test. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt powerless. Like the billions in his bank account, the skyscraper he owned, the world he ruled. None of it mattered. Not in that moment. Then a second horn honked. This one angrier. Ethan pressed the gas. The car surged forward. But he didn't feel like he was moving at all. He couldn't focus. Not in the meeting, not during the presentation, not even when the board members applauded the company's quarterly growth. Ethan Rivers sat at the head of the table in his tailored suit, nodding automatically, while his mind drifted somewhere far away, somewhere colder, quieter, humbler. Leo. The name echoed in his skull like an old melody he hadn't heard in years. After the meeting, Ethan locked himself in his office, pulled the curtains, and stared at the skyline. But he didn't see buildings. He saw a cracked mirror in a dusty back room. He saw a cheap mattress on the floor, a broken fan spinning too slowly in the summer heat. That's where he had met Leo. Years ago, before the billions, before the headlines, before Silicon Valley even knew his name, Ethan had been homeless, broke, angry, sleeping behind a convenience store and stealing granola bars just to stay alive. And Leo had found him, or maybe rescued was the better word. He owned a tiny repair shop on the edge of the city. Nothing fancy, just a few dusty shelves, some soldering tools, and a heart too big for a world that didn't care. Leo hadn't asked for anything. He just handed Ethan a broom, pointed to a corner, and said, "You clean, you eat." That's the deal. Ethan had cleaned, then he had fixed things, then he had learned. And when the ideas began pouring from his head, ideas about tech, design, algorithms, Leo gave him a desk in the back room and let him build. That desk had been Ethan's launchpad. But success came fast, blinding fast. Investors called, offers flooded in, and Ethan, young and hungry, took them all. He promised Leo he'd come back, promised he'd bring him along, but he never did. He told himself Leo was better off without the chaos, that the man who'd helped him build a foundation didn't need to be dragged into the storm of success. But that was a lie. The truth? Ethan forgot. And now the man who once gave him everything had nothing. Leo hadn't changed much. The same strong jawline, the same calm eyes. Only now they were sunken, tired, and older. So much older. Ethan stared out the window, hands clenched. He'd built his empire on Leo's kindness, and then he left him behind. Now fate had dragged him back into Ethan's life, like a ghost asking one question. What are you going to do now? The penthouse was silent, too silent. Outside, the city buzzed as usual, but inside Ethan's apartment, not even the ticking of a clock dared to interrupt his thoughts. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, eyes wide open in the dark. Sleep never came. His conscience was louder than any alarm. Why did he fall? Where were you when it happened? Why didn't you help? Each question struck harder than the last, as if the silence had grown fangs. At 2:37 a.m., he gave up, got out of bed, padded barefoot across the cold floor to his study. He opened a drawer he hadn't touched in years. Photos spilled out, curled edges, faded ink, and moments from another life. He picked one up, a grainy snapshot of him and Leo standing in front of the old repair shop. Ethan was young, lean, with grease on his hands and hope in his eyes. Leo had his arm over Ethan's shoulder, smiling like a proud father. Another photo, Ethan holding a burnt circuit board, Leo pointing at a diagram behind him, then one of them laughing, mid-repair, surrounded by chaos and wires. Leo had been there when no one else was. When Ethan was sick, Leo brought him soup and left it by the cot. No questions asked. When Ethan failed at building his first prototype, Leo didn't mock him. He encouraged him to try again. When Ethan got his first investor email, Leo had stayed up all night helping him write a response. Every memory was a punch to the chest. He hadn't thought about those days in years, hadn't even passed by the old neighborhood. He'd been too busy growing, climbing, rising, but Leo, he had fallen, and Ethan had never once looked down to notice. The guilt gnawed at him now like rust on steel. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt small again. Not because he had nothing, but because he had everything, and still managed to forget the man who gave him his start. The next morning, the sun hadn't fully risen when Ethan stood in front of his closet, staring at the rows of tailored suits and designer shoes. He bypassed all of it. Instead, he reached for an old hoodie, jeans, and a baseball cap, the kind of outfit he hadn't worn in years. No bodyguards, no driver, no schedule. Just him. He stopped by a corner deli and bought 2 breakfast sandwiches and 2 bottles of water. Then, with hesitant steps, he made his way back to that same block, the one with the cracked sidewalk and the battered cardboard box. Leo was still there. Same position, same silence. The children were gone, probably at a shelter or school. But Leo sat with his back straight this time, staring ahead as if holding the entire world at bay with sheer will. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He hadn't felt this nervous in decades. He walked slowly, carefully, like approaching a sleeping lion. When he stood in front of Leo, the older man didn't react. Ethan cleared his throat. "Hey," he said, keeping his voice low. "You hungry?" Leo finally looked up. His eyes were tired, rimmed red, but alert. He scanned Ethan's face, perhaps expecting the usual pity or suspicion strangers often carried. But Ethan didn't let their eyes lock too long. He simply held out the sandwich and the water. Leo hesitated for a second, then nodded once, slowly. "Thanks," he said, voice gravelly but calm. He accepted the food with both hands like it was something sacred. He didn't ask Ethan's name, didn't pry, didn't even look too closely. Instead, he took a small bite and looked out toward the street. "Most people just walk past," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "Some pretend I'm invisible. Some don't bother pretending." Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat. "Well, not today," he said quietly. For a moment, there was silence between them. Not awkward, just heavy. Leo looked at the sandwich, then at Ethan. "You don't look like you're from around here." Ethan smiled faintly under his cap. "I used to be." Leo nodded as if he understood something deeper. "Funny. This city chews up the old and forgets them, but the streets remember." Ethan sat down on the curb beside him. Nothing more was said, but something had shifted. The curb was cold beneath Ethan, but he didn't move. He just sat there next to Leo, sharing the quiet like it was a language only they understood. After a while, Leo broke the silence. "You ever lose everything?" he asked without looking over. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't have to. His silence was enough. Leo took another bite of the sandwich, chewing slowly. "My wife's name was Maria," he said, voice soft. "She had this way of laughing that made the worst days feel bearable. Even when money was tight, even when the shop barely made rent, she made it all feel okay." Ethan felt his chest tighten. Leo's eyes remained fixed on the ground. "Cancer took her. Fast. We didn't even have time to fight." He paused. "Medical bills stacked up. I missed rent payments. The shop shut down. Then came the eviction notice. I packed what I could, but the rest..." His voice drifted off. Ethan clenched his fists, nails digging into his palms. "I had nowhere to go. The city doesn't care about men like me." Leo gave a bitter chuckle. "It only cares about what you can give it, and I had nothing left to give." He looked away for a second, as if remembering something he didn't want to say. "The worst part," he continued, "was losing the kids." Ethan turned his head sharply. "Social services found us sleeping in a park one night. Said it was unsafe. Said I wasn't fit to care for them anymore. I begged, man." His voice cracked then, just slightly. "But they took them." He pulled a worn photo from his pocket, creased and faded. 2 small kids, a boy and a girl, smiling, alive in a way they weren't anymore on that sidewalk. "My daughter's name is Lily. My boy's Jacob. I get supervised visits once a month." if I'm lucky. He tucked the photo away with shaking hands. They think I'm a failure. Ethan looked at him. Really looked. Beneath the unshaven face and worn clothes was the same man who once gave a broken teenager hope. They don't know who you are, Ethan finally said. Leo let out a breath. Maybe not, but I do. Ethan felt the weight of that sentence settle deep into his bones. One blow after another had knocked Leo down, and no one had helped him back up. Until now. Ethan stood in front of the mirror in his office bathroom, staring at his own reflection like it belonged to someone else. The perfectly styled hair, the crisp shirt, the gold cufflinks, they all looked like armor. But today they felt more like a mask. He splashed cold water on his face. Leo's voice still echoed in his head. They think I'm a failure. The city doesn't care about men like me. Ethan clenched the edge of the sink. This wasn't just about one man falling through the cracks. It was about the cracks themselves. How wide they were, how deep, how deliberately they were ignored by those standing safely on the other side. He walked back into the boardroom. His team was already there, discussing expansion plans and shareholder returns. Charts filled the screen. Numbers, projections, profit margins. Ethan didn't sit. He stood at the head of the table and said, "We're changing direction." The room fell silent. One of the executives frowned. "You mean in strategy?" Ethan shook his head. "I mean in purpose." He looked around the room. Men and women in suits who had followed him for years, trusted his vision. Now he was giving them a new one. If someone's downfall is caused by a broken system, Ethan said slowly, then that system must be changed. And we're going to change it. Murmurs spread, confused looks, a few nervous glances. We have billions in assets, he continued. We build apps to make people's lives more convenient. But what if we built something that actually saved them? He could feel the pushback before it came. Investors wouldn't like it. PR might spin it wrong. Profits might dip. He didn't care. Because for the first time in a long time, Ethan Rivers wasn't building for the future. He was rebuilding the past. And this time, he wasn't leaving anyone behind. Ethan knew Leo's pride ran deep. If he offered help directly, Leo would likely refuse. So he did what he did best. He built quietly, strategically, in the background. No headlines, no press releases, just action. He started by renting a modest apartment on the edge of the city. Nothing flashy, but clean, warm, and safe. It had 2 small bedrooms, a working heater, and a window that caught the morning sun. Ethan paid for it 6 months in advance under a fake name and made sure it was close to a bus stop, a clinic, and a grocery store. Next, he contacted a private social worker, someone experienced, someone discreet. Her instructions were clear: find Leo, assess his situation, and do everything legally possible to help him regain custody of his children. Then came the groceries. Ethan created a series of prepaid cards and had them anonymously delivered through a charity program, along with winter jackets, new shoes, and school supplies labeled with Lily and Jacob's names. Leo didn't know who was behind it. One day, after handing Leo another quiet sandwich at the curb, Ethan watched from a distance as a young woman with a clipboard gently approached. She spoke kindly, and though Leo was cautious, he didn't push her away. Progress. Ethan watched from the shadow, like a ghost trying to right his wrongs. He told himself this wasn't guilt. It was responsibility, gratitude, redemption. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. Leo had once saved Ethan's life without expecting anything in return. Now Ethan was doing the same. Only this time, the stakes weren't just about survival. They were about dignity, about children growing up with their father, about giving back what the world had so cruelly taken away. And this was only the beginning. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning. The staff expected updates about the next product launch or a potential acquisition. Instead, Ethan stood before the entire company and unveiled something no one had seen coming. We're launching a new division, he said, voice steady, gaze focused. A social innovation branch dedicated to building technology that addresses real-world inequality, housing insecurity, access to education, reintegration programs for families. Whispers spread like wildfire. Is this a PR move? Someone muttered. Where's the profit in that? Another whispered. But Ethan didn't flinch. He knew exactly what he was doing and who he was doing it for. He called it Project Shelter. It wasn't flashy. It wouldn't double their stock price, but it was going to mean something to him. Because while his team scribbled notes and updated investor decks, Ethan sat with one truth pressing against his heart. This wasn't about strategy. This was about Leo, about the man who gave him shelter without asking for credentials, about the man who gave him a desk before he had a name, about the man the world had forgotten, but whom Ethan never truly could. He didn't mention Leo's name in the press release. There was no tribute video, no staged reunion. This was personal, quiet. A thank you whispered into the blueprint of a better world. And even if no one else understood the why behind it, Ethan did. Some debts weren't meant to be paid with money. They were meant to be paid forward, with change. The package had arrived like the others, quietly without fanfare. A nondescript box left outside the apartment door, neatly sealed, containing essentials. Diapers, canned food, a pair of clean shoes in Jacob's size. Leo brought it inside, setting it down on the kitchen table. The apartment was still new to him. The walls hadn't yet absorbed memories, and the silence still echoed. But it was home, for now. He opened the box slowly. Inside, everything was thoughtfully arranged. But as he moved a can of beans aside, something caught his eye. A folded piece of paper, half tucked under a loaf of bread. He pulled it free. No letterhead, no long message. Just one corner of the paper sticking out, and on that corner, two small initials written in sharp, purposeful ink. E.R. Leo froze. It couldn't be, but in his gut he knew. All the pieces fit now. The sudden appearance of the apartment, the social worker who seemed too well connected, the packages arriving exactly when he needed them, the way the stranger in the hoodie never asked questions and always looked away just a little too quickly. Ethan Rivers. Leo let out a breath, slow and heavy. He sat down hard in one of the kitchen chairs, staring at the paper like it was a ghost. He hadn't seen Ethan in over a decade. The last time had been a phone call. Brief, rushed. Ethan had just secured his first round of funding and was flying to New York. He had promised to return. He never did. And yet, here he was, helping, quietly, without credit, without obligation. Leo wasn't angry. He wasn't even surprised. He just felt something shift in his chest, something warm, unfamiliar. Forgiveness. Because sometimes when a debt goes unpaid long enough, the heart forgets the cost until a letter brings it all back. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Leo stepped out, his worn boots silent against the polished marble floors. He held no appointment, wore no suit, but his eyes, calm, steady, knowing, cut through the chaos of the corporate lobby like a blade. It didn't take long for the front desk staff to react. Security guards were on him within seconds, hands hovering near their radios. "Sir, you can't be here," one of them said firmly. "Do you have an ID? A meeting scheduled?" Leo didn't answer. He didn't flinch. Up above in the executive suite, Ethan was mid-sentence during a strategy briefing when his assistant rushed in. "There's a man in the lobby. Says he's here for you. Name's Leo." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Without a word, he stood and walked straight to the elevator. His team exchanged confused looks, but no one followed. The elevator ride down felt endless. When the doors opened, Ethan saw them. Security flanking Leo, tense and uncertain. "Stand down," Ethan said, voice sharp and clear. One of the guards hesitated. "Mr. Rivers, I said stand down." The men stepped back. Ethan approached Leo slowly, something between a smile and a wound flickering across his face. "You should have told me you were coming," Ethan said. Leo shrugged. "You didn't tell me you were helping." A beat of silence passed between them. The entire lobby watched, frozen in place. Then Ethan turned to the staff and said something no one expected. "He has more right to be in this building than I do." Murmurs rippled through the space. But Ethan didn't care. He motioned toward the elevators. "Come up. Let's talk." Leo didn't move right away. He studied Ethan's face. Older, sharper, but still the boy he once found, broken behind a store. Finally, Leo nodded. "All right, let's talk." And just like that, the past walked into the present, not as a ghost, but as a man ready to reclaim his place in a life he helped build. The door to Ethan's private office clicked shut, muffling the world outside. For the first time in over a decade, Leo stood in the same room where billion-dollar deals were signed, staring at walls lined with awards and framed headlines. Ethan Rivers, the visionary, the disruptor, the tech king. But none of that mattered now. Leo's voice was quiet, but it cut like a blade. "Why didn't you ever come back?" Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it again. He had prepared so many explanations over the years, excuses dressed up as logic, the rapid rise, the investors, the timing, the pressure, but none of them felt right now. Not in front of Leo. His throat closed, and then without thinking, Ethan dropped to his knees. The polished floor met him with a thud. His hands trembled. His head bowed. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't for show. It was shame, raw and real. "I'm sorry," he whispered, barely audible. "I owed you everything, and I left." Leo stood still. No anger, no judgment, just silence, heavy and slow. A tear rolled down Ethan's cheek, then another. His shoulders shook, not with drama, but with the quiet collapse of a man who had built the world and lost sight of its foundation. The press conference had been scheduled under vague terms. A major announcement regarding corporate direction. The room was packed. Journalists, analysts, influencers. Everyone expected a product reveal, maybe a merger. What they got instead was silence. Ethan stood at the podium, no teleprompter, no notes, just him, and the weight of a story he'd carried alone for far too long. He looked out over the crowd, took a breath, and began. "Before I was a CEO, before I had investors, headlines, or even a place to sleep, there was a man named Leo." The audience stilled. Ethan continued, voice calm but heavy. "I met Leo when I was 16. I was homeless, lost, angry. He gave me a broom, a corner of his shop, and eventually a desk. That desk became the birthplace of my first product. My first shot." He paused. Cameras clicked. Reporters leaned in. "And when success came, I left. Promised I'd come back, but I didn't. I forgot him." Gasps rippled across the room. Not scandal, but something deeper. The kind of collective inhale that happens when truth slaps harder than fiction. Ethan's voice softened. "Last week I found him again, on a street corner, with 2 children and a cardboard box." The microphones captured every word. But beyond the microphones, the truth echoed in hearts. "I'm not sharing this for sympathy or applause," Ethan said. "I'm sharing it because every empire has a foundation. Mine was built on Leo's kindness, and I owe him more than I can ever repay." He looked directly into the cameras. "We talk a lot about innovation in this industry, but maybe the greatest innovation we can make is remembering who helped us rise." No applause, just silence. Respectful. Full. And in that silence, the world heard something rare. A billionaire telling the truth. Weeks after the press conference, something new appeared on Ethan Rivers' company website. Not a product, not an investor pitch, a banner. Bold, simple, introducing Second Circle. Because everyone deserves a way back. The initiative wasn't just another nonprofit. It was a full-scale movement. Co-founded by Ethan and Leo, Second Circle was designed to disrupt the cycle of homelessness, not with handouts, but with hope, structure, and skill. The mission was clear: take individuals who had been left behind by the system and offer them the tools to re-enter it, with power. A tech training center was the first to open in the very neighborhood where Leo had once run his small repair shop. The building was renovated, repainted, and filled with computers, whiteboards, and instructors ready to teach coding, digital literacy, repair work, and resume writing. The second floor? Temporary housing for program participants. The third? A daycare for parents trying to rebuild without sacrificing their children's safety. Ethan funded it all, but insisted Leo be the face. "This was your idea long before I had the money," he told him, and Leo, though humble, accepted. He stood at the opening ceremony in a simple button-up shirt, no script in hand, and said, "We don't need charity. We need chances." I got mine years ago when I met a lost kid named Ethan. Now it's time others get theirs. The crowd applauded, but the real measure of success was what happened after. Dozens signed up. Volunteers poured in. Other companies reached out, asking to partner. And for the first time, those once invisible on the streets began to feel seen and needed. Second Circle wasn't just a program, it was a promise that even in a broken system, a second chance could be the first step towards something extraordinary. The camera zoomed in slowly, framing Leo against the soft backdrop of the Second Circle Training Center. His hands were folded in his lap, his eyes calm, steady, weathered by time, but no longer burdened by it. The interviewer leaned forward, voice gentle but curious. You've become somewhat of a symbol since the launch, but I have to ask, did you truly forgive Ethan Rivers? Leo smiled. Not the kind that dodges pain, but the kind that has lived through it. No, he said plainly. I didn't forgive him. The interviewer blinked, caught off guard. I let go of the anger inside me. There was a pause. Not awkward, just real. Leo looked down for a moment, then back up. Forgiveness sounds like something you give to make someone else feel better. What I did, it wasn't about him. It was about me. He leaned back in the chair, exhaling slowly. Carrying anger, it's like dragging a chain through everything you do. I dragged it for years. And the day I saw Ethan again, I had a choice. Keep pulling it or drop it and walk forward. The interviewer nodded, silent. Leo continued. He didn't come back with apologies. He came back with action. And sometimes that speaks louder than sorry ever could. The camera caught the light in his eyes as he turned to glance toward the window, where two kids in Second Circle shirts were laughing while assembling their first circuit board. That's why I'm here. That's why I stayed. Because life isn't about keeping score. It's about building again, especially when you never thought you'd get the chance. The interview clip went viral within hours, not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. The old photo Leo once carried in his pocket, creased and fading, was now framed on the wall of their new home. But right next to it was a second photo, fresh and full of life. Lily and Jacob in matching uniforms, smiling in front of a tall, ivy-covered school gate. They had been accepted into a private academy through a scholarship fund quietly established by Ethan. But the moment the school learned their story, something shifted. The faculty embraced the children like their own. Teachers volunteered extra hours. Classmates welcomed them without hesitation. Lily, in particular, blossomed. One afternoon during a robotics class, she assembled a functional mechanical arm using scrap parts and some clever coding. Her instructor recorded it, just a short clip of her smiling as the machine moved, and posted it online with the caption, "From cardboard boxes to code, meet Lily, 10 years old, future engineer." It exploded. Within hours, the video went viral, retweeted by tech CEOs, shared by educators, reposted by celebrities. People from every corner of the world left comments. She's incredible. Her smile just gave me hope. Where can I donate? And they did. Donations poured in, first in hundreds, then thousands, then millions. Not just for Lily and Jacob, but for Second Circle. People didn't want to watch a success story. They wanted to become part of one. Leo was overwhelmed. He'd never asked for fame. But when he saw his daughter explaining a coding concept to a crowded classroom like she'd been born to lead, his eyes welled up. She's going to build something incredible one day, Ethan said beside him, watching proudly. Leo nodded. She already is. The children who once leaned silently against their father on a sidewalk were now laughing, learning, dreaming. Not because of luck, but because someone had given their father a second chance. The press room was quieter than usual. No flashy graphics, no product demo, no business jargon, just Ethan Rivers, standing alone behind a simple podium, a single spotlight casting soft shadows behind him. He looked different, more grounded, more human, as if the weight he'd carried for years had finally settled into something solid. Today, he began, I'm not here to talk about growth, profit, or innovation. I'm here to talk about legacy. Reporters glanced at each other, unsure where this was going. Ethan took a breath. I've spent most of my adult life building things. Companies, systems, technologies. I've been called a visionary, a genius, a pioneer. But none of that matters if I can't look back and say, I helped someone rise when they had fallen. He paused, scanning the crowd. I'm donating 40% of my personal fortune to Second Circle. Permanently. Not as a pledge, not as a press stunt, but as a legal, irreversible commitment. Gasps. Cameras clicked furiously. Ethan raised a hand. I don't want buildings named after me. I don't want a statue. Let my conscience be remembered, not my brand. Behind him, a screen lit up with the names of those who had gone through Second Circle and landed jobs, launched startups, reconnected with their families. Ordinary names, extraordinary stories. This isn't about guilt anymore, Ethan said softly. It's about justice, about building a system where no one has to sleep on a sidewalk with their kids and pray to be seen. The room stood still. No applause, just quiet respect. Ethan stepped away from the podium and disappeared behind the curtain, not waiting for interviews or reactions. He had said what he came to say, because some legacies aren't etched in stone or code. They're written in the lives we choose to lift. The offer came during a quiet morning. Ethan had invited Leo to the rooftop of the Second Circle headquarters. Just the two of them, a thermos of coffee between them, and the soft hum of the city below. Ethan slid a folder across the table. This would make you a millionaire overnight, he said. Equity, assets, a seat on the board. It's yours if you want it. Leo didn't even open it. He just looked out over the skyline, eyes calm, steady. Do you remember what I told you once? Ethan raised an eyebrow. Which part? That the city only cares about what you can give it, Leo said. Well, I don't want to be something it takes from again. He leaned back in his chair. I don't need millions, Ethan. I've had nothing, and I've survived. But what I have now, peace, purpose, my kids back, that's wealth no bank account can measure. Ethan was quiet. Leo continued. I want to live simply. I want to walk my kids to school, fix bikes on the weekends, teach a few classes at the center. That's enough. That's everything. Ethan nodded slowly, a small smile forming. You always did know what mattered most. Leo smiled back. I just forgot for a while. Same as you. The folder remained on the table, unopened, untouched. By the end of the day, Leo had donated it back to Second Circle. Every penny, every share. Use it to build more classrooms, he told them. More chances. And while the world called him humble, or even foolish, Leo didn't mind, because the richest man in the room isn't always the one with the biggest check, but the one with the fewest regrets. The documentary, Second Chances, swept across streaming platforms like wildfire. Viewers praised it for its honesty, its heart, its message. But there was one scene, just one, that left the world in quiet awe. No narration, no dramatic music, just a camera, a street, and two men sitting side by side on an old wooden bench. Leo and Ethan, no suits, no stage, just a pair of friends in worn jackets, sipping coffee from paper cups. They weren't speaking, just watching the city pass by. Cars, laughter, footsteps, life. And then from the edge of the frame, a man shuffled into view. Dirty coat, matted hair, a shopping cart full of plastic bags and broken things. A glance from passers-by, then nothing. The world moved on, except for them. Ethan reached into a paper bag beside him, pulled out a sandwich. Without a word, Leo did the same. Together they stood. Together they walked over. And together they handed the man two sandwiches, one warm, one wrapped for later. No cameras in their faces, no inspirational speeches. Just a nod, a smile, a hand on the shoulder. The man looked at them like he couldn't believe it. Then slowly he smiled back. And as he walked away, the camera lingered, not on the man, but on Leo and Ethan, who had sat back down without fanfare. They didn't speak. They didn't need to, because in that moment, everything had come full circle. Two men who once stood on opposite ends of the street, one with nothing, one with everything, now met in the middle. Not as a billionaire and a beggar, not as a savior in the saved, but as two human beings who had learned the value of falling and the greater value of helping someone rise. It wasn't just a scene, it was a message. That true legacy isn't built in boardrooms or bank accounts, but on sidewalks, one act of kindness at a time.